Good evening. If we could all rise. Mr. Magano, would you lead us in the pledge, please? Thank you. All right. Madam Secretary, has this meeting been notarized in the paper?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay. Memorialization of resolutions, we have none.
No.
Acceptance of the minutes of March 13th. The minutes are in your package, and if there's any questions, if not, I'll take a motion to accept the March 13th, 2019 Planning Board minutes.
Make a motion to accept the minutes.
I have a second on that? Second. Having a first and a second, is there any questions on the minutes? If not, I'll take a roll call. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Communications, we have no communications. Oh, we need the roll call.
Mr. Hurkevich? Councilman Delana?
Here.
Mr. Davis? Mr. Kelly? Ms. Lee? Mr. McEnone? Ms. O'Leary? Mr. Volusin? Ms. Matilla? Chairman Ty?
Everybody's here.
Yep. Mr. Rogoff?
I'm here.
Mr. Cornell? Mr. Leo Cavello?
Here.
Great.
I guess we've been waiting for this night. Site plan subdivision, we have none. North American Properties, the Riverton, informational update.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Jennifer Phillips Smith. I'm an attorney with Gibbons PC, and I'm here tonight on behalf of Saraville Seaport Associates Urban Renewal, which is the master redeveloper for the former National Lead site in the Saraville waterfront redevelopment area. We are here this evening to give you an informational update. We were here several months ago to give you an overview of the project, and we wanted to fill you in on what we've been doing over the course of the last few months, and also give you a preview of what you're likely to see in the next few months to come. We were originally scheduled to be here in March, but we understand that your second meeting of the month was canceled, so we are here today. During that time, one of the items that we were hoping to preview for you has actually started to move through the borough process. So it's fortunate that we're here to be able to both give you a general overview of the entire project, but then also to start talking about a proposed amendment to the waterfront redevelopment plan. That proposed amendment was endorsed by Sarah on March 28th, and then on April 8th, just this past Monday, the council adopted a resolution referring it here to the planning board. It will hopefully come through the planning board and then go back to the council for first and second reading. So we get to do both of those items tonight. Give you the general overview, the big picture, where have we come from, where are we going, and then specifically, what does this proposed amendment mean? Here tonight we have Kevin Polston, who is our project executive, and he's going to go through a slideshow to bring you up to date.
Thank you, Jen. It was actually almost exactly 1 year ago I was before the board, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for inviting us back.
You're welcome.
Board members. We've been busy for the last year. I would like to give you an update on the project. I would also like to maybe start at the beginning and give a little bit of history. I know everybody in this room has some knowledge of the history of the project, but given the changes over the past year to 2 years with the project, I want to give a little bit of background and reiterate the reasons why we're here, and also give you a little peek into the future of what the next several months will look like as we have applications pending before the planning board over the duration of 2019. So, and I'm sorry, this we're a little bit low. Yeah.
Ooh, I haven't seen that for a long time.
Is that better? So we all know this. That's a little bit better. We all know this site, obviously the former National Lead. Remediation, this is the plant was on the west side of the Garden State Parkway, which is the area where we're focusing most of our pre-development activities right now. I do want to call your attention to one feature here that we'll come back to. The bulkhead here along the water is where materials were received from the river to be processed into the plant. And that's where the water meets the land in the most connected fashion. We actually have incorporated that into our design, so I want to touch on that just a bit as we go through the plan tonight. The remediation of this site has been in progress since 2009. This was actually not a recent picture, but one when the site was torn up in the process of excavating materials. And this is a more recent picture from last fall as we were undertaking some geotechnical activities, moving materials, and surcharging the northern part of this Parcel C area here. And those activities are ongoing as you drive over the bridge. I'm sure you've seen trucks moving on and off the site over the last several months. The site consists of 3 parcels, parcels A, B, and C from the east to the west, straddling both sets of bridges across the Raritan. We'll talk a little bit more about Parcel A in a few minutes. That's been preserved for permanent green space. This is not part of the development program. Parcel B is landlocked and it will require additional improvements, roadway improvements, and geotechnical improvements for future development. And so all of our immediate development plans are focused on Parcel C. A recap of the timeline of this project. In 1999, the Borough Council adopted the Waterfront Redevelopment Plan, designating this area as an area in need of redevelopment. It included the NL Industries site as well as several hundred acres surrounding it. Following a request for qualifications and request for proposals process, the redevelopment agency selected O'Neill Properties Group out of Philadelphia as the redeveloper. This was in 2007. In 2008, O'Neill partnered with an institutional investment firm to fund the pre-development and development of this project, and the parties formed Sayreville Seaport Associates Urban Renewal LP as the redeveloper. That same year, the agency and the redeveloper executed the Master Redevelopment Agreement, which governed the execution of the development program over time on this site. In 2009, the environmental remediation commenced. The remediation was facilitated by the settlement of claims with NL, among NL and the agency and the redeveloper as far as allocation of responsibility for remediation. The redeveloper and the agency assumed responsibility for remediation of upland contamination, and NL Industries retained responsibility for contamination in the river. This actually brought to a close a protracted condemnation, litigated condemnation suit. The county had actually, Middlesex County had at this point had funded the condemnation with a approximately $40 million loan, and we'll come back to that. That's been substantially paid off over the years, but the county was a partner in trying to get control of this land from NL. In 2013, what we see now as sites as parcels A, B, and C, that assemblage was completed. There was actually about a 7-acre sliver of land that was acquired from the MCUA, and the waterfront redevelopment plan was amended to accommodate the new parcels of land, and the remediation continued through this time frame. In 2014, this body approved the Bass Pro Shop site plan and subdivision. Some of you were here at that time, I'm sure, and recall that process, but that was the first formal planning board activity that we're aware of on the site plan process. The following year, the planning board approved a general development plan for what was then known as Luxury Point at Sayreville. In 2016, there was insufficient progress was being made towards starting Luxury Point at Sayreville. As a result, the owner investor in SSA terminated its relationship with O'Neill's Properties Group and acquired all of the interests of O'Neill in the redeveloper entity. So at this point, it was 100% controlled by the investor. And in 2017, that investor brought in North American Properties, my company, to pursue a new plan and to execute on that development plan. And we've been involved in this project for almost 2 years. I'm accompanied tonight by my colleagues Mark Fetta and Mark Toro, who are involved in this project on a day-to-day basis. Excuse me. So I'll come back to North American Properties and what we're about, but I do want to touch base on a few things that have happened. We just went over really a 20-year timeline, but focused primarily on the past 11 years. And obviously a lot of dirt has been moved, a lot of remediation has taken place, but other things have happened for the benefit of the community that I think we should point out. Parcel A has been preserved. It was deeded to the county and to the state for permanent green space under the Green Acres program, 55 acres along the bay. It was acquired using redeveloper, state, county, and borough funds. It was deeded to the county and state, as I said, and it was remedially capped so that the remediation program was closed out in 2018, and we're actually working on documentation now to finalize that so that the redeveloper moves on from this project, from this part of the project. On parcels B and C, an easement has been granted to the county in the area of 13.7 acres for permanent access, for permanent green space and access to the waterfront. That's an area roughly along the water for parcels B and C. This is a representative illustration of what that area could look like. The area will actually be defined once the construction of improvements is completed within this area. Part of the redevelopment agreement that I referred to earlier requires the redeveloper to construct a waterfront walkway, promenade, multi-use path with amenities, various seating areas, lighting, and other amenities along the waterfront for the public benefit. It was deeded to the county in 2008, and here's some representative illustrations of the types of improvements we've been studying over the last several months. We'll certainly come before you with more detailed plans for that as this process progresses later this year. In addition, I mentioned that SSA, the redeveloper, has been involved in this project since 2008, and substantial commitments, financial commitments, have been made to the project. Just to give you some idea of the magnitude of those commitments, over $100 million was invested in the land, involved in land acquisition and related acquisition costs. That county loan balance is now down to $3.5 million. So I mentioned that the original loan balance of $40 million, a substantial amount of those funds have been repaid, and the balance will be paid out of the pilot RAB bonds that will be associated with the project. Remediation and related costs have exceeded $80 million. For context, in 2009, the State Department of Environmental Protection issued $20 million in hazardous discharge site remediation fund grants to assist with the remediation. The $20 million represented approximately 50% of the projected cost of remediation at $39.8 million. So that budget has more than doubled, and there are still funds to be expended out there. We're starting to see the finish line on what those costs may be, but they're well in excess of the original budget, as I mentioned here. The Garden State Parkway improvements that you see underway now, the reconstruction of Exit 125, that was a cooperative process with the Turnpike Authority. The redeveloper committed $15 million to that project. That money has been invested and has been drawn down over the years. There's one remaining disbursement out of the escrow for those funds, and that project will be complete later this year to provide access, full access from northbound and southbound for the parkway. Other costs, in addition to the first three categories, engineering design, various fees and taxes are in excess of $25 million. There's, the redeveloper has paid a fee to the agency of $200,000 per year since 2008. And land taxes are paid by the redeveloper currently at the level of $934,000 a year. So North American, why are we here? Well, our group is based in Atlanta. Our company's based in Cincinnati, but our group is based in Atlanta. And our specialty is urban format, vertically integrated mixed-use projects. So what do we mean by that? It's projects where we have uses stacked on top, one on top of the other, and what you might consider a traditional Main Street format. And I'll go through an example of this. This is a site in the northern suburbs of Atlanta, Alpharetta, Georgia. We acquired it out of, it was a bank-owned property, failed project, acquired in 2011. It's approximately 87 acres. And I'm going to be very careful about my facts here because the man who built it sits behind me. So if I get something wrong, he may tap me on the back. But approximately 87 acres. And from July of 2011 till the summer of 2017, this was the transformation of this site. The format here, as I said, is a Main Street format. What you see is an office building here over retail, hotel over retail, multifamily apartments over retail flanking the street here and here, loft office in the middle, 2 levels of office over retail. So it creates this high-density core, and it's surrounded by lower density, more traditional retail, medical office, townhomes, single-family homes. And so it's not about just the uses, but about the place and what the dynamic is of how these uses interact. What's in the mix here? 485,000 square feet of retail, 650,000 square feet of office, a 330-room hotel with an adjacent conference center, and 627 residences, 110 single-family homes, and 517 apartment units. This project is about a third the size of Riverton, just for comparison. When you look at the acreage, the developable acreage, and when you look at the content. So this project was actually acquired from us by the investor in Riverton in late 2016. It was actually acquired in 2 stages. And in the acquisition of this project, the investor said there's probably some value that can be added with this concept to this location. Obviously, the mall that had been the core of the development program here was not going to happen. Enclosed regional malls are not being built in the United States anymore based on where retail has gone. So this is an idea of the town as the place, so to speak, the traditional Main Street town center as the core of the project. This is a photograph from Avalon, just to give you an idea of the intimacy of it, the verticality of that street where you're surrounded by uses. And it's a place where you can live, you can work, and you can play. But it's not so much about the various components. As I said, it's a place where really people commune. One of the things that we've seen with the advent of technology, everyone has their phones and everybody's glued to their screens, but the counterpoint to that is we still crave human interaction. And so we've had unprecedented success at Avalon creating a place where the community gathers. And that's not just building buildings and building spaces, but it's building places where people can gather informally, as groups, places where you can have peace and quiet, places where you might get on where you have Wi-Fi and might get on your electronics, but it's where other people are surrounding you. And it's about creating that community. So how does this translate to Riverton? So I mentioned the bulkhead previously. You see here in the plan, this is the bulkhead location. One of the things that we celebrate about Riverton is its connection to the Raritan. As humans, we're drawn to the water. And so we wanted to create an opportunity for the public for our guests to get as close to the water as they can. In this northern area, there's very gentle slopes from the development plain, which is obviously post-Sandy floodplain level. So you'll be pretty at 18 feet above mean high water line at building levels when you're developing the land. So to get down on a slope from 18 feet to about 4 feet where the river is over a long distance, there's not much physical connection. There's a visual connection to the water, but here there's a much more physical connection to the water, where that bulkhead creates basically a wall that you stand at the waterfront on the back end of the wall. So we oriented our Avalon-type Main Street Town Center core along the water here. In this plan, this plan was actually approved by the agency, excuse me, about 6 weeks ago. And to just walk you through the plan, the component parts, visually red is retail, blue is office, purple is hotel, yellow is apartments, the tan and brown smaller buildings are townhome buildings, and the crosshatched areas here in the center are where various uses are constructed over retail. So it's retail on the ground plane, hotel, office, or residential above. The total program here, when you add all of the components, is about 6.5 million square feet of commercial and residential space. 2,000 residential units consistent with the waterfront redevelopment plan and the master redevelopment agreement. And the commercial densities under the waterfront redevelopment plan are not limited, subject to compliance with whatever uses are permitted within the plan. So it's really a market-driven concept, and one of the things we've tried to accomplish with this plan is to create a destination, create the place, the main street, the place where the community wants to gather, and by creating that core, we can drive demand for other uses that want to be close to that core, close to that place. One of the phenomena that we've seen in our other projects is that by creating this place that drives traffic, others have developed around us. In Alpharetta, at Avalon, every available piece of land around us is being developed for hotel, office, residential, retail. And so to combine all of these opportunities in one envelope is one of the things that's very attractive about Riverton. As I said before, Parcel B, Parcel B here, we're showing about 1 million square feet of commercial density on Parcel B. There's an opportunity here to provide a higher density format. We see a long-term, that's a long-term play. I don't think Parcel B gets developed for 7+ years. So as we see Parcel C build out, we may have an opportunity to provide even a higher density development format on Parcel B over time. So it's shown now as office buildings with retail on the ground floor and a hotel conference center. When I was before you a year ago, we shared the preliminary plan that had been approved by the redevelopment agency after our initial design studies on this site. The original plan from 2018 is on the left, and the latest plan is on the right. You see there aren't significant changes to the basic concept. You see some refinement in the grid here from this original plan, the residential and office to the north into this pattern. We've been working very closely with the remediation team to dovetail the development plan and the remediation plan. So one of the fundamental constraints of this site is remediation to commercial-only standards in certain areas where residential can't be built. So we're honoring those demarcations in our plan with this grid. We've also changed some road configurations, but we'll get into the site plan in more detail as we come before you with the site plan application. Just to talk about how this project may deliver over time, I mentioned the Phase 1C, this mixed-use core, the Avalon model from Atlanta, the Riverton mixed-use core. What we foresee starting, we'll talk about the next phase of site plan submissions that we anticipate bringing before the board. But our plan is by the end of this year to start construction on the first phases. These will be the phases up front, Phase 1A, 1B, and 1C would follow construction start about 12 months later. 1C is a much more complex format, obviously with vertical buildings, vertically integrated buildings, with a lot of pre-leasing on office and retail. It's a much more complex starting requirement. So we anticipate the start of 1C to be about 12 months behind phases 1A and 1B. And then over time, we'll build out Phase 2, retail in the core here, and primarily office and residential in the northern parts of Parcel C, and I discussed the program for Phase 4 in the last slide. So this is what you will see later. We anticipate having applications in by June 30th for site plan review on the Phase 1A, 1B, and 1C components, represented by these areas here. Approximately 678,000 feet of retail, 281,000 feet of office and commercial space, 215,000 feet of hotel and conference, waterfront facilities, transient dockage, and 565 approximately residential units. This is a rendering of entering the mixed-use core of Riverton to give some idea of the relationship of the buildings, the streets, the sidewalks, and the pedestrian orientation of this core. This is a photograph from Avalon. I'd like to give you a reference point here. So one of the community gathering spots and really popular places in Avalon is this Village Green, and we've designed a similar, very similar community gathering space here in the middle of this mixed-use core. It's actually slightly larger here than it is at Avalon. So just when I show you these photos, I wanted to give you an orientation to how it translates to this Riverton plan. So this is the summertime setup. It's this is actually a concert. It is a turf surface. You can see this is an event, so it's pretty crowded. We have a wintertime setup. We have a permanent setup for ice skating. All the infrastructure is there. The vendor comes in and runs that seasonally. We have representation of kind of the peak environment in this Village Green. This is actually Santa's arrival last year, and to us, kind of the beachfront property is the apartments that overlook this central core. That's some of the highest value residential in the area, and you see the folks there on their verandas overlooking the activity. And we're trying to learn not only from our own success here with this model, but other areas throughout the state of New Jersey, where we can bring the best ideas that we find and incorporate it for this community. So next steps, where do we go from here? Jen actually mentioned the waterfront redevelopment plan amendment has been accelerated. We anticipated that we would be here for this information session a month or so before this was presented to you, but we actually, with the cancellation and the scheduling, we've been expedited there. And I mentioned the Phase 1 site plan submissions. We're on target. We're actually the design team's working furiously to meet that June 30th deadline to get the application in for July cycle.
Sorry, what was the application? The target June application consists of what?
Site plan submissions for phases 1A, B, and C.
Is that all housing?
No, sir. I'll go back.
Is it housing and office?
It's all uses. So this is the Phase 1 component parts. 678,000 square feet of retail. So just to point out the areas, this is retail, and then the mixed-use core, which has retail, office, hotel, and residential. The residential count is approximately 565 units, 2 bays of apartments over retail here and here, and between 80 and 120 townhomes on the water. We're still working on the design of that component. So this is the content. This is what we anticipate the content. And we actually, we may have only this first half for formal, this eastern part of the Phase 1C for formal site plan approval, just based on some waterfront development permit issues that we're dealing with the DEP on. So we may come in with just the first half of the mixed-use core in this first round. Any other questions about the history, the why we're here, the what we're trying to accomplish? Jen, do we want to talk about the waterfront redevelopment plan? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little thrown off by the expedited agenda for the waterfront redevelopment plan.
We want you to summarize that plan for us.
Sure, absolutely.
And we can go over that For all the board members that just got that, that's the letter from Terry. That's, this has gone through Sarah and been recommended to the council, what we're gonna talk about now. And it's been put in our lap. We can either vote on it tonight, or we can vote on it at the next meeting, whichever you feel comfortable with. After they explain, you'll know as much as I do, so if you explain it, maybe we can vote on it tonight.
Certainly,
Let me just interrupt there because.
Yes, sir.
I'm responsible for accelerating, I guess, part of that procedure because, let me make it out here, thank you. I received this package today. It's dated April 10th. Somehow it got to my inbox, and when I saw it, I said, okay. You know, what am I supposed to be doing with this? And so, having received it, I figured, okay, somebody must think this is, you know, going to be heard this evening. So I responded to it and wanted to understand whether or not there were any notice provisions associated with it. So I did this long legal email to the powers, whoever to be, and then I opted to prepare it for this evening in the event that it was going to go forward and the board was of the mind to prepare what we're responsible to do, which is a report to the governing body, because this is a referral issue under 4055D-26 of the municipal land use law. So what I did was I was, I guess, a bit over proactive, and I already, in light of the SARA report and their recommendation, you know, I drafted a report slash resolution indicating, you know, anticipating the board would act favorably upon the proposed changes. So that's what I did. It's all my fault. I take full responsibility for that.
We certainly appreciate the.
It doesn't have to be done tonight. It could be done the next meeting. I mean, it's based on what you've indicated. I basically followed the changes that were set forth in the documentation as well as Sarah's review, and I included that in the draft resolution which has been circulated this evening.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, we were expecting to be back the 24th or so, later this month to discuss that as an agenda item. This was literally only an information session. We certainly are happy to address any questions, but we also want a full, you know, the board to have a full opportunity to review the documentation and assess it and discuss it. We're not trying to short circuit any process at
Well,
all,
I understand
sir.
that, but, you know, what we figured is, having the chance to hear it right from the horse's mouth, so.
Okay, great. Well, so
You're right.
I was prepared to give just some highlights. There's some content and there's some detailed content. So let me just explain the genesis of this. I mentioned the waterfront redevelopment plan was originally enacted in 1999. It was amended, the last amendment was 2013, I believe, and that was when there were some changes in the land, the parcel composition and some changes in the program. And so as we came in and looked at this new program, this new plan, we assessed the redevelopment plan and said, okay, where is it that we think this should be tweaked for, you know, changes for the passage of time, changes for the market conditions, things that we think would be beneficial to help facilitate development of this. So I was prepared with just some high-level bullet points, so I'll be glad to go to that. So the first category is updates to some permitted uses, and I don't have any graphics because I was anticipating bringing them in the next meeting, but there are 3 categories of use that we've added as permitted uses under the plan. They relate to self-storage facilities. What we've characterized as mid-rise vehicle sales. So it would be, there's a prohibition in the plan on used car sales are not permitted. And out in the marketplace today, there are some pretty exciting and kind of trend-forward vehicle display and sale facilities that, you know, kind of aren't your traditional used car lot. We think are pretty exciting, and we can certainly explain that in more detail. And then alcohol production facilities, so craft breweries, craft distilleries, obviously on trend for you know, this entertainment-driven community. So those are the three specific permitted uses that we've suggested be added to the waterfront redevelopment plan. We, the plan as it's composed today only deals with a specific standard for 90-degree parking spaces, a traditional 9x18 space, which we think is certainly the appropriate size for a, you know, a surface parked retail lot. But we've added some standards for garage parking. We anticipate a significant number of structured parking spaces, structured garage parking spaces, which particularly in areas where they're office or apartment uses that are low turnover versus retail. Smaller spaces, slightly smaller spaces, we're talking 6 inches, are industry standard in that regard, so we've made that suggestion. We've added some provision for a limited number of compact spaces throughout the project. We've made some adjustments to the waterfront walkway standards. After studying, going around the country and studying the dimensions, how bikes and pedestrians interact, how this promenade, how this walkway will work with its limited distance. It's not a through system. It's a limited 1.5 miles approximately run. It's not going to be a high-speed bicycling area. So we've proposed some adjustments to the standards for the size of that walkway, but preserving significantly sized gathering spaces along that promenade for public events. Currently rooftop signs are prohibited, and going back to the first image I showed with the Dutch Boy sign that was so associated with this project historically, when we go around the country, we see some really cool opportunities for some retro rooftop signage that might really bring some compelling design components to the project. And also there are some standards in the not unusual standards in the plan for screening of rooftop equipment. And we just want to clarify that rooftop equipment doesn't need to be screened, so it can't be visible from the bridge that's 150 feet in the air. There's just some technical aspects there. And we're updating the roadway and utility schematics just to show the changes over time. I mentioned Parcel A has been dedicated for green space. So, for example, we don't have to provide roadway access or water service to that parcel. And then we have suggested a waiver of the veteran street name ordinance, subject to approval of the agency of an alternative means to honor veterans. We're actually focused right now on the main waterfront plaza as being kind of the Veterans Memorial Plaza in lieu of naming the streets throughout the project after veterans. We understand that the Veterans Ordinance has been around for some years, and the original intent of that ordinance is really there's a limited number of veterans still left on that ordinance. But from the standpoint of the design of the project, we want to try to find a different and more compelling way to honor the veterans of the borough. So those would be what I would call the high points of the amendment. There's certainly other detail clarifications. You know, I want to say it's maybe 6 pages. So
That's it?
if you would like to run through it in more detail, obviously council's
Oh,
here.
we have a question.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Magano?
I have a question on the bullet that's not up there, and I'm referencing page 3 of the document, if you want to take a look at it.
Sure.
Section 2, paragraph 12.
Jim, would you join us?
It's not page 3, but it's numbered 3. The original verbiage says that all residential development shall be designed as to minimize the generation of school-aged children. That was the original language. Then it was deleted to be replaced with, all residential development shall be designed as to minimize the construction of units with more than 2 bedrooms. I'm not an attorney, but can you delineate the difference between those 2 statements?
Yes. So I will admit that this came from a legal discussion, And
I surmised.
and in part, it is, the borough is currently going through its affordable housing process. And you have to comply with the Fair Housing Act. And the Fair Housing Act does not allow anyone, boroughs, private developers, to discriminate against families. So we want to make it clear, we are not discriminating against families, but we do understand that the intent of the borough is to develop a project that is going to be focused on the mixed-use, sort of urban, dense format that's going to attract, or at least we've seen it attract as far as in Rutgers studies and others, going to attract millennials and people on the other side of the barbell who are seniors or people who have decided to move out of their single-family home and move into a smaller format. The intent of what is being constructed has not changed, but I think it needs to be clear that no one is intending to discriminate under the Fair Housing Act. There's not going to be a sign at the door that says no families allowed, no children allowed. That would be against the Fair Housing Act, and we certainly wouldn't do
What was
that.
the other side of the legal argument that didn't agree with that? How are you discriminated against? Saying that every time you build a development, you have to build it with 3 or 4 bedrooms?
So there's actually a limitation on the number of bedrooms in the redevelopment agreement, that there's a limitation on the number of 2 and 3 bedroom units that can be constructed on
Because
site.
my concern is when you say minimize the construction of units with more than 2 bedrooms, I could say I could build 500 units with 3 and 4 bedrooms and say I complied with that because I only built 25% of my build-out.
So in the redevelopment agreement, it is specified, and
Do we know what that number is?
I believe it is 494 3-bedroom units.
How many?
494 3-bedroom is the maximum.
494 3-bedroom.
Is the maximum allowed under the redevelopment agreement as it stands today, regardless of whether this has changed or not.
So then my next question would be, is there a fiscal impact statement that's been done to see what the impact on the school districts would be with 494? Because I've heard, and I'm supportive of this project. I think this is a great thing for Sayville, and I'm waiting for Bass Pro, really waiting. But all the renditions I saw, there were fiscal impact studies that minimized the impact on the school districts. And what I'm being told now is that it's the fair housing law that requires us to increase the number of bedrooms.
No, the Fair Housing Law is not requiring you to increase the number of bedrooms. The number of bedrooms that is allowed under this project is something that is set by the redevelopment agreement and this is not changing as part of the redevelopment plan. What is changing is that your current ordinance says that in order to build housing, you have to comply with a resolution of SARA adopted in 2007 designated O'Neill Properties Group. O'Neill Properties Group is not here anymore. So to have that as your standard doesn't make sense. O'Neill is not here.
So 494 3-bedroom units was always the plan?
That is not something that's changing here. That is already in the agreements that are already in place, that this,
'Cause I don't recall that number from the initial.
it's not in the redevelopment plan, but it is in the redevelopment documents. I will tell you that as we go through this process, this is one piece of the puzzle. This is the zoning standards on what we can build. There's also the redevelopment agreement. There's also, as you mentioned, a fiscal impact analysis, which is something that may come along as we go into applying for a pilot. Those are all pieces of the puzzle that all have to come together.
That's my concern, the fiscal impact statement, the multi-bedrooms, and then pilot, when you pull those 3 together.
So if I
When
may,
does that come together?
so there will be a physical impact study.
I understand. Has to be.
So when the pilot application and underwriting process begins in earnest over the next few months, that physical impact statement will be a fundamental piece of that analysis, absolutely. And so, and just to reiterate, the 494 units has been in place since 2012. It was put in place through a settlement agreement between the agency, the borough, and the redeveloper. So it predated us, so this is not intended to change that number. It's really to get us out of any potential fair housing law compliance issues. Our attorneys aren't very comfortable with the term age targeted is not a legally recognized term. But I'll defer to the attorneys on that.
But it's still on there, that the paragraph starts with age targeted residential uses.
We've tried to define it, actually. So we tried
So how do you define it?
by being, by the units being, by what we see as an objective standard, which is a cap on the number of units that are larger than 2-bedroom, with a cap on the number of 3-bedroom units. So that in and of itself is the criterion by which the minimizing school-age children is measured. That's the intent, that was the intent of the
But I think the
capping.
concern is, and I'm talking from being on a Board of Ed for 12 years, is that with 494 units of 3 bedrooms, that generates a lot of children.
I can't speak to that number of children that will be generated. That's obviously something that the physical impact study will address. And also, I will point out that the redevelopment agreement calls for a contribution to the schools as part of our program. So we've
Is that actually in the redevelopment agreement?
yes.
It's specified in amount?
It's in the redevelopment agreement, it's
Still
been
in
in the redevelopment agreement, and it's not being, we're working on an amendment to the redevelopment agreement. In fact, that's why I was a little late tonight, we had a meeting with the agency. We're not proposing any changes to that payment scenario to the school system.
Thanks for the explanation, it makes sense.
Certainly, thanks you for the question.
Anybody else on the board have any questions on what we're talking about? What's your pleasure on this? Do we want to sit on this and look at it and vote on it next week? Okay.
I read it while the presentation was going on.
I read it too, so I mean, I have no problem that we'll handle this at our next meeting. We're going to do it at our full May meeting.
We're happy to return at
May
at your convenience, absolutely. May 8th?
And Mr. Maganon will be in the chair that night. I'll be in Italy.
Congratulations.
My wife's going to sing for the Pope,
Nice.
and I'm trying to get a blessing.
Well, thank you, we appreciate your consideration. We'll be back on May 8th.
Does anybody else have any questions of them? Go ahead, Anne Marie.
Also on the same page.
Use the mic.
labeled as- Also
Turn it on.
Also, on the page that's labeled 3, it refers to the assisted living facilities and care retirement communities. Is that senior housing? Or is there a number for that as well?
So the change that we're proposing, the only change that we're proposing to paragraphs 13 and 14 is to move skilled care residential facilities from the category that would count against the residential limit to outside of the residential limit. Skilled care residential facilities are actually skilled nursing facilities. It's a medical, it requires medical
Right, so that's not
delivery of
big.
medical services. So what we propose is that's kind of the threshold by which you look at so assisted living, which isn't directly delivering medical services, but just support services, would still be counted against the residential cap. But skilled facilities, which require specifically nursing care, would be considered a medical facility, not a residential facility under that change. That's the only.
Are there any residential senior housing in there, or age-restricted?
We don't have any, in our current plan, we don't have
Okay.
any specified age-restricted 55
Because
and over.
sometimes I know they go hand in hand, they try to be next to
Yeah,
each
so
other,
fi-
so you can move from one to an assisted. So that's why I was wondering if there was any age-restricted in the plan.
We don't have any in this first phase. I would anticipate that over time, as this project builds out, there will be demand for that based on what we're building and the
Right.
customer that it attracts.
Right.
But there's
Okay, but there's nothing now.
currently on the plan. But we'd like to have one of the things that I mentioned
would
earlier.
too.
Our plan is designed, unlike a mall, which it either goes or it doesn't go. Our program is to build the core and build that place. And each of the blocks in the northern part of the site can be whatever the market tells us it wants to be.
Right, and as it builds, that's what you know, you find out what the
And
market
so it could
wants
be
and who's
in
coming.
2-acre or 6-acre increments that those uses come to us and say, hey, we want to be part of this community. And
Okay.
that flexibility is what we're looking to build in.
Okay,
So this nursing,
Great. I'd like to see it for the record.
this
Thank you.
nursing component would be outside of the residential, so that would take away from your commercial end?
No, as I mentioned earlier, the zoning doesn't cap commercial. What we're showing as commercial densities is just what we've designed to.
Right.
If the market says, hey, we want,
A
Sayreville,
nursing place, that's where you would slot it.
I'm sorry, Mr.
If
Chairman.
that's where the nursing place would be slotted, then.
Yeah, so it's
Okay.
representative. If what we're showing as a retail block right now or an office block, if 2 years from now someone comes to us and says, hey, we really want to put a hotel there, then we would modify that designated block, and as we come in for the site plan and subdivision approval for that block and with the design, we would be before this body and we would show that change.
Okay. Go ahead.
On that same note with the nursing home, so there isn't something planned now, this is just what you're saying to be.
Right, we have no immediate plans, and we have had actually no conversations with any nursing home operators.
Concern is that we've approved the nursing home in the past, and that was supposed to be a, and I would not want to see that happen.
Duly noted, ma'am.
Okay, you're right. We're in the middle of that. We're gonna open this up for public.
It's not a public hearing.
Not a public. Okay, is that all you have?
That's what we have. Thank you, folks.
We will see you in May.
We'll be back May 8th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, gotta like think about it.
I'm being told by the lawyer this is just a presentation, that, no. To answer your question, you can ask us questions at the end. Just about. Just about. We're out of here in a couple of minutes. If you guys want to hang on and give some input, then we'll do it that way. We have a letter of the clerk. We're gonna take that on the May meeting. I need a vote to cancel the April 17th meeting. I need a motion and a second to cancel the April 17th meeting. I have a
Second.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We will meet on the 24th to see the affordable housing ordinance. We do. We have a quorum for that meeting. We're going to have it in the, because,
308.
yeah, but the zoning board is going to be using this meeting, so we'll use the other one. Make a motion to open to the public.
Make that motion?
Second.
All in favor? Anybody in the public like to speak about anything that we talked about tonight? Come on up, give your name and your street.
Robert Kraskowski, 26 Gillen Drive.
Hi,
Question.
Robert.
Has a pilot application been made with this particular, I don't know whether they do it in stages or whether they do it for the entire development? Has that application been made?
I don't think so, but but I don't
Has
know,
not.
during the process, there will be one.
Okay. And
Their target for that is the end of June, Robert.
in the gym. When something like that is made, and the financial impact, whatever they provide, is that analysis then given to, like, the planning board? And do you people have resources to really delve into that? And if not, do you hire an outside firm to assist you in making that evaluation in terms of how it impacts?
It's also given to the town council, too, to look at.
Oh, I
mean,
understand that, but who does the in-depth analysis so that the community knows that it's good, bad, or indifferent to what's being proposed?
Council, right? That's part of the pilot agreement, so it's gonna be us and the council that look that over.
It's really the borough council's
I'm
responsibility.
sorry?
It's really the borough council's responsibility.
It's about council?
Yes.
So they would have the ultimate
Yes, sir.
obligation to make sure that what's given to them makes sense for this borough?
Well, it's that the borough gets a fair shake, yes, you're correct.
Yeah, fair
Yeah,
shake,
so, I mean, your question should be at the borough council to that,
okay?
okay? When they came before us, and correct, part of this was that they got those pilots from the state and the county and the town, otherwise this wasn't gonna work.
Well,
And I
I
don't think,
understand the state and the county can make decisions for themselves, but can they force a decision on this borough in terms of what's good for the borough?
Well, this is the planning board. really deal with the financing issues. We don't really deal with the pilots. That's a governing body issue.
Yeah, we just deal with the land use issues. They deal with the financial issues, the borough and council, mayor and council. We're just gonna deal with the land use part of this. The pilot part that you're talking about, you have to go to the council and talk about.
And that'll be when? You're saying the end
June
of June?
30th, right? You were talking about getting that together?
We don't have a date for that.
You don't have to, no.
You gotta pay attention to the borough agenda.
Well, but I'm trying to understand, if they don't have a pilot in place, and what I just heard was that the pilot was a necessary piece of this thing going forward, how do they go forward without knowing that that pilot is going to be accepted?
Again, this is not, you're not gonna get a good answer from this body, because we don't deal with the financial end of the project. That's part of the redeveloper, the redevelopment agreement, Sarah and the borough. We don't deal with that. We're just gonna.
They're gonna
deal-
recommend back to us the way that, if they're acceptable to the pilot.
Who's going to recommend?
Sarah and the governing body.
We don't put our stamp of approval on that. We don't deal with the financing. You have to ask
We have nothing to do with the pilot.
you gotta ask the borough those questions. They're all good questions, but we're not capable of answering them for you.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, when Sarah gets it and they give it to the council, they'll figure out what's best for the town. We're gonna tell you if their land use is in accordance with the agreement. That's all our job is. And so far, it looks, you saw the presentation. Any other questions? Any other questions? I'll take a motion to close the public session.
Make a motion, we close the public.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you for all coming. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion, we adjourn.
All in favor? Thank you very much. See you on the 24th.
7 o'clock, not 7:30, right? 7.
7.
Good point.
7
Hey, Donnie. How are you? You taught us all well. You taught us all well, buddy. Old man Gwistak taught us well.
Right on.
Doing all right. Where you been? He's the only one that's, I didn't say that.
Everybody can just sit there and say yes.